Hello everybody, I'm Colin D. Ellis and welcome to the Culture and Coffee podcast, where every episode I discuss a new topic of workplace culture and provide some insights and some practical things for you to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe and to share with people who you may think would be interested. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. Hello everybody, it's Colin here. On this week's podcast, I'm going to talk about one of the most complained cultural aspects that I hear over and over again, and that is meetings. So I have my cup of coffee and I'm ready to go. So let's start by talking about why we have meetings in the first place. They seem to just become a normal thing for organisations to do. And now I was going to say office-based organisations. I hesitated slightly there. I was going to say office-based organisations. But actually I've got some sports clients too, and they have meetings just like everybody else. Now meetings are a great way to share information. And I think ultimately this is what's going through people's heads when they decide that they're going to hold a meeting or run a meeting. But it's become the default thing that they do when they want to share information. I think one of the criticisms I have, one of the suggestions for improvement, it's criticism really, suggestions for improvement that I have for clients is that they actually take the time to think about how they want information to be sent, how they want information to be received. Such that they can then decide whether a meeting is actually the right thing to do. Now, there are some reasons. I don't want this to be a meeting bashing. I did plenty of that when I was a government employee, and I'm not going to do it again. No, it took years of therapy to get over that. But meetings are important, and they can be crucially important. If you work in any kind of legislative role or any kind of role that demands an extra level of scrutiny, then meetings are necessary. They're not even important, they're necessary. And then they need to be minuted to make sure that all the key points are actually taken down. And then those minutes get lost whenever there's a request for information. But that's a whole other podcast. But why are meetings important? Well, the reasons meetings are important, well, you get to provide consistent communication, so everybody gets the same message at exactly the same time. That's one of the kind of goals of a meeting. Everyone gets this information in the same way at the same time. It's why email is the worst form of communication, because everybody can read something slightly different into the words that you use. So that's the first reason. For me, the second reason is about building relationships between people. Particularly professional relationships. I know there are those meetings where we go round and round and round the table asking everybody how their weekend was. I'm not really talking about that. They're nice meetings. I'll get to that. I'll talk about the 4 different kind of meetings that I've observed. But on the whole, they generally strengthen the relationships between people when they're run well. They're a basis for immediate feedback. A meeting, you can just sit down with someone and say, here's one thing I observed, here's one thing to think about, here's something you did well, here's one thing to think about. They provide an opportunity for clear expectation setting. I've talked in the past that the expectation setting is a process. And it's a skill that people need to learn, and doing it kind of in a controlled environment, if that's the right way to put it, controlled, makes it sound like a lab experiment, a meeting. Doing it in a private environment, that's what I actually meant to say, means that you can ensure that the message is understood. Meetings provide an opportunity to challenge. They provide an opportunity for someone to float an idea and then for that idea to be challenged, or for people to say, that's really great. And it's an opportunity to be inclusive. What we want within our meetings is and I'll give you kind of a blueprint for what good looks like. But what we want is for people to kind of understand, that everybody gets a say. We want people to come in prepared to share information. Ultimately, I would say the benefit of holding meetings is to make decisions. It's to actually take on board information and make sure that you listen to people's viewpoints before you then actually make the decision. So that, they're the kind of some of the benefits of meetings. And yet, the things that I hear from clients all the time are things like, there's too many of them. They're run really badly. They're a drain on our productive time. They don't start and finish when they should. I get invited to meetings that I have, kind of no interest in. I get invited to meetings that I have no input in. People are disrespectful. They're checking their phones. They're talking over the top of each other. These are the things that I hear, and they're not uncommon. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for most organisations to have similar problems to this. Now, the number of meetings that we have has gone up significantly. Since the pandemic, for office-based employees, Microsoft looked at their own statistics of using Microsoft Teams and found that the number of meetings has gone up 252%. 252%. And I think one of the reasons for that, just as an aside, I think one of the reasons for that is prior to the pandemic, even though we had tools like Slack, and Microsoft Teams was in its infancy, for those of you who are using it, we also used to phone people. The phone was a mechanism to speak to someone one-to-one. Post-pandemic, that doesn't seem to happen quite so often. What we get instead is people just putting a meeting in a calendar and saying, let's meet, rather than just having a quick conversation. The other thing as well, which I connect often to meetings, is the fact that the amount of kind of after hours and weekend work has grown. So after hours, I think 28% of people in one survey saying they were working longer hours after work time. So almost a third of employees that were researched. And 14% were working weekends where they didn't previously work weekends. And this is because people don't have time in the days to actually do their jobs. Sounds ridiculous thing to say. People don't have time to do their jobs. And of course, if you're a senior manager, going to meetings is part of your job, but it's not all of the job is to go to meetings all of the time. But the number of meetings has been increasing exponentially year on year. I read some statistics from the National Bureau of Economic Research yesterday, which said that kind of the number of meetings has dramatically increased from the 1960s. And then again, since the pandemic. So it was looking at these jumps. And I think they found that the number of meetings globally there was 13% more meetings globally post-pandemic. And that there was, I think it was almost 15% more attendees. So we were inviting more people as well. Although I was talking to someone earlier this week and they said that worse still was those meetings that you attend where people just talk at you, where it's less of a meeting and more of a monologue. And it's just someone talking at you all the time. Much like a podcast, funnily enough. Talking at you all of the time and you never get a say. So I just think we're kind of globally in some really bad habits with regards to meetings. Atlassian Tech Company found that 30 hours a week are wasted on meetings. And, certainly in my experience, the quality of a meeting is usually defined by two things. Is the engagement of the people in the room, like how much do they want to be there? How interested are they in the topic? How willing are they to actually join in? And then the emotional intelligence that they display when they're actually in the meeting. They're the two markers. I feel like if you kind of draw that quadrant in your mind almost, so let's say engagement's the horizontal line and emotional intelligence is the vertical line. in the bottom left, if it's low emotional intelligence, low engagement, they're just wasteful meetings. Like meetings for meeting's sake, that's what we call wasteful meetings. Like there's 10 minutes of content, but they last an hour. And if you book an hour, you'll fill an hour. I always, get clients to change the default meetings from, to 40 minutes or 20 minutes. If you've got high emotional intelligence but low engagement, then you've got people who kind of want to be in the room. Yes, it's really great that we're here. Yes. And there's loads, usually in these meetings I call cheerful meetings. There's loads of people. This is where you spend like the first 15 minutes going around. How was your weekend? What have you got planned this weekend? Oh, how are the family? And someone challenged me on that once. They were like, oh, but surely you'd want to do that. I'm like, not for 15 minutes of a 45-minute meeting, you wouldn't. I always ask people how their weekends were in like one-to-one meetings, never a whole group setting like that. Have you ever been to those settings where it's just like, right, everybody introduce themselves and it takes like an hour? It's like, what are you doing? We just want to make sure that everyone's introduced themselves. You don't have to do that. So these cheerful meetings where we invite way too many people and we never get to the decision that we need to make because someone hasn't read the papers. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't had time, whatever. Because they didn't want to kind of prioritize their work to make the time to do the meeting, to do the pre-work, whatever. Then you get the stressful meetings when people are late, when people are having side conversations, when people's behavior is really poor. Those are those meetings where people talk at you. They are really stressful. And you're like, what? Like in your head, you're like, what's the point of this? Why are we doing this? Someone gets verbal diarrhea. That's an awful phrase. I'm sorry I used it now. But it just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, right? And it's just like, will you shut up? And then there are the successful meetings. The successful meetings have kind of got what I call the 7 Ps of successful meetings. And so I'm just gonna take you through the 7 Ps of successful meetings. Because if a meeting has all of these things, then that's how you get to success, right? So purpose. The purpose has got to be clear. Yeah, the purpose has got to be crystal clear. Why this meeting? Why now? Crucially important. Also kind of understanding the outcomes that you expect. The purpose is to make this decision. The purpose is to discuss this paper. The purpose is, to reconnect as a team, whatever it might be. But that purpose is really understood. That's the first. The second one is priorities. You do the most important things first as part of your agenda. And the agenda, that's something that's included in the meeting invite so that you can see it. So you do the most important things first in case you run out of time. Because if you run out of time, what you're going to do is what you're not going to do is organise a follow-on meeting. It's a follow-on meeting is just a determination of how bad you are at meetings. The third thing you're going to do, I know, it's truth bomb right there. Third thing you're going to do is only invite the people that you need when you need them. Some people have got into the bad habit of FYI. Just join the meeting. I'm sure you'll find it interesting. I'm sure I won't. Yeah, I'm sure this is just a platform for you to tell me how smart you are rather than an information sharing session that I can take something out of. Only invite the people when you need them. Also, if you're having like a longer meeting, and by longer, I mean 50 minutes, not 3 hours, because that's a workshop, not a meeting. And you only need someone for 5 minutes, just invite them for 5 minutes. Yes, it means you have to spend more time preparing, which is point number 4, preparation. So as part of the preparation, you're going to draw up an agenda. You're going to highlight who's speaking, for how long and when. If there are papers to be read, you're going to send them a minimum of 3 working days in advance so that people have got time to prepare, time to read them, time to come up with their comments, and then share them, which leads me to the 5th point, which is participation. If you've been invited to a meeting, you've been asked to prepare, you show up, it's your job to speak up. Now, the one action to dramatically improve your meetings, which is the title of this podcast, is the meeting chair, right? That's your one action. I'll come back to that in a second, because what we want is our meeting chair to make sure that everybody participates. But ultimately, it's everybody's job, in inverted commas, to turn up with the right intention. Don't just sit there on your hands waiting to be asked, because sometimes the meeting chairs aren't very good. In fact, most of the time, the meeting chairs aren't very good. And it's not their fault. Well, it is their fault, but it's not. Anyway, I'll get to that. But you have to show up ready to actually join in and participate, especially if you've done the preparation. Why would you not? The sixth P is promises. So at the end of every meeting, you want to end with your promises to each other. These are the actions that we're going to take. And you want to make sure that you deliver on those promises. And that's up to the meeting chair to follow up after the meeting to make sure everyone's done everything that they said that they would. And then the last P is present. So you make sure that while you're in the room, virtual or otherwise, you're not kind of looking around, you're not kind of on your phone, you're not having side conversations. If you're virtual, you're not working on anything else. You know, when I ran a virtual session for a team last week and I asked them to close every other application bar the one that we'd be using, just to help them not get distracted. But ultimately, the one action that organizations can take to truly transform their meetings is to train people on how to chair them. This is not, you know, it's funny, when I think back, it's not funny, but when I think back, long time ago when I first started out as a manager in the late 1990s, when I was 12, one of the courses offered by our then personnel department, that's how old I am, HR's had about 15 names since then, is how to chair a meeting. And yeah, I just don't see it being offered very much now. Like, you know, during the pandemic, it's one of the things I did a lot of is how to chair virtual meetings. And so I think it's crucially important that, you know, organizations, if you know, I always say that an organization's goal should be fewer, higher quality meetings. That's my way of saying, I get that meetings are a really important part of an organization's culture, a part of the way that it does things. But the goal should be fewer, higher quality meetings. And that's only possible if you've got a meeting chair who really understands their role, understands that they're the role model for everybody in the room, and that actually, you know, kind of sticking to those 7 Ps, the purpose, priorities, people, participation, promises, presence, you know, making sure that people stick to those is their job. And if everybody was trained on how to be a really great meeting chair, you'd have fewer, higher quality meetings. And that should be every organization's goal. So what do we expect from a meeting chair? Well, we expect them to be on time. They generally join a minute before everybody else, and they try and finish a minute before it's due to finish. They choose just the right amount of time and no more. You know, I mentioned 20 minutes and 40 minutes. Most people's days have become dominated by meetings that, you know, are driven by the default in Microsoft Outlook. Like, how dumb is that? Microsoft's running your calendar. That's what it is. Now you can change. Microsoft will say, well, hang on a minute. You can change those settings. Of course you can. I used to change my default setting. In fact, my default settings for meetings is still set to 20 minutes when my assistant arranges meetings are at 20 minutes. That's the default. Or client meetings are at 40 minutes. I don't want to waste people's time. Also, like, the meeting chair, make sure they never start on the hour, end in the hour, start on the half hour, because you want to give people time to get to and from, because some people just aren't disciplined. But at the allotted time, you start the meeting. You don't wait, we'll just wait for everybody else to join. No, we won't. No, we won't. We'll just get straight into it. I think, I remember reading General Stanley McChrystal's book, Team of Teams, a really good book. And he said the rules for any meeting are established more by precedent and demonstrated behavior than by written guidance. Often what teams will do is they'll come up with a meeting rules. Sometimes in offices, they used to be stuck on a desk, every meeting room. Follow these rules. And then the behavior of the meeting chair was appalling. In fact, they were the ones who were late. So at that point, all that guidance has gone out of the window. And you know, back to what kind of General McChrystal said about, it's about demonstrated behavior. It really is. We want our meeting chairs, as soon as they see people are distracted, is to shut that down. As soon as they see side conversations, just shut it down. I did it at a culture workshop a couple of weeks ago. I was talking, I asked somebody a question, and someone over to my left was talking. And I was just like, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt. I was like, guys, please, it's disrespectful. All right. And brought the other person back in, just making the point. It's disrespectful. Don't talk when someone else is talking. It's very disrespectful. But we need the meeting chair to be that, almost play that traffic cop role, kind of more of this and less of that. If you're checking your device, they tell you to stop. Better still, do what I used to do. I used to have a fruit bowl when I used to be in the office as a manager. I used to have a fruit bowl. I used to get people to put their phones in the fruit bowl because people are just a nightmare. Now I ask people either to not bring them to workshops or else put them onto airplane mode. There's a time to use them, and I make sure that technology is a big part of my workshops. But actually, I just want to help them by removing that potential distraction. If it's virtual, you get people to shut stuff down. But by training the meeting chair, what organizations can do is drastically improve the quality of your meetings. Because if every single meeting chair behaved in exactly the same way, I don't want all of your meetings to be the same because they just can't, depending on the subject matter, the topic, right? But if they all behaved in a consistent way and they all knew how to practice those 7 P's of successful meetings, then you would achieve the goal of having fewer, higher quality meetings. So yes, you can transform your meetings just by taking that one action of transforming the meeting chair. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Culture and Coffee podcast. Try for now. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you'd like to find out more about how I can help you transform the culture of your team, head to my website at www.colindellis.com.